All right, the Reds. It's Talking Reds and Talking Reds this morning with James Pearce from The Athletic, formerly of the Liverpool Echo. I'm sure you know who he is. James, big European game for Liverpool tonight out in Italy, but an interesting one in terms of sort of who's available for Jurgen Klopp and also the fact that it's Manchester City at the weekend. When we were talking about it on our preview show last night, we got ourselves tied up in all kinds of knots about how weak he might go, how strong he might go, what formation he might play. There seems to be lots of ways he could approach it. What's your thoughts on it, mate?
Yeah, well, I think there'll definitely be rotation again. I think coming so soon after what was a really energy-sapping contest against West Ham. Was it Liverpool's sixth game in the space of 17, 18 days? So Klopp's been very clear that for him, he regards this as the most kind of grueling schedule he's ever had to contend with in the most difficult of seasons. So definitely be changes. I think he will have one eye on the Etihad at the weekend as well. And I think also these two games, I'd be surprised if we saw him go with the 4-2-3-1, and I don't think for these two away games we'll be seeing him field four attacking players and really going for it, because I think Atalanta, similar to City at the weekend, will ask questions of this Liverpool team that, as well as Liverpool have done to win the four games on the bounce without Van Dijk so far. I think this is a step up in class this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And sort of looking at the bookies odds, there doesn't seem to be much between the two teams, so they obviously see it as being a tough test for Liverpool, and obviously Atalanta as well. Some pedigree there, scoring a lot of goals, fourth in Serie A right now, giving a few teams a tonking as well over sort of recent years, including Everton a couple of years back. So it does feel like, given Liverpool's for and against goals record and theirs, because as much as they've scored 17 in the league, they've also conceded 13. It's a bit Liverpool-esque. It looks like it's got goals written all over it, doesn't it? So nailed on for a 0-0 then.
Yeah, do you know what? I think they're an absolute breath of fresh air. Atalanta, I loved watching them in the Champions League last season, and they get as far as the quarters. I think they were really unlucky to go out in the end as they did with those late goals against PSG. And they feel like, to me, the opposite of what we kind of usually associate facing an Italian team in Europe, because usually you think, going to Italy, they'll be, really set up well defensively and not really take any risks, and it'll be almost like a game of chess. But everything I've seen from Atalanta so far suggests they will be bold and really take the game to Liverpool. And it's going to be really interesting to see how Liverpool handle it, because it doesn't happen that often. So often, there is a fear factor associated with facing Liverpool, where teams are scared to take risks and gamble because they know what Liverpool can do to them on the counter attack. So, even little things like I'm interested to see what happens with Alexander-Arnold and Robertson. Whether are they told by Klopp to rein it in, because so much of Atalanta's great attacking work comes from those wide areas, or are Trent and Robertson almost going to be back to play their natural game and just hope that we ask more questions of them than vice versa. So it has got the makings of a cracking game.
And obviously everyone is still talking about the centre half situation. Nat Phillips, fantastic at the weekend, but not registered for the Champions League. Same really for Billy Cometio. I know he trained, but he's not on the list either. It seems to be pretty nailed on that it's going to be Rhys Williams at centre half.
Yeah, I'm expecting him to play. I think that that was the word at the weekend, that they felt that it would have been too big an ask to have put Rhys Williams through 90 minutes against West Ham and then 90 again on Tuesday night. And obviously you've got the danger of him picking up a knock thrown in as well. And I think also the fact that West Ham with Haller, it was almost perfect really for Nat Phillips. Probably suited him being up against a big physical centre forward like that, rather than someone blessed with real pace. So yeah, I think obviously Joel Matip is an option for Klopp. He wasn't really giving much away when he was asked about it yesterday. I think Matip was back in full training on Sunday. So with Matip's injury record and the fact that he very rarely does he play 2 or 3 back to back in the space of a week, I just wonder whether Klopp will hold Matip back for the Etihad, because to me that would probably be the most sensible approach, because I think Sunday is a bigger game for Liverpool in the grand scheme of things than this one.
Yeah, I think you're right on that, and it's a shame with Matip, isn't it? I think Klopp said something a couple of weeks ago around his fitness where he sort of not directly quoting here, but it was along the lines of that he could only really play one game a weekish, and obviously at the moment the schedule's absolutely unforgiving. It does seem to me that maybe he'll hang on for City. And as you say as well, I think as football fans, we never want to sort of come out and say this, but if Liverpool draw tonight, even if they get beat tonight, because of the start they've made in the group, you would still expect them to progress, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and I think, especially in a schedule like this, when it is such a balancing act, Klopp won't say publicly that he's prioritising anything over another. He will always just tell you, no, the next one is the most important. But realistically, of course, he has to prioritise and make changes accordingly. And that's why I just think it just makes more sense, I think, to hold Matip back for the weekend, to make sure he's got a full week training under his belt. I just think when he played, what was it, the derby at Goodison, I think, what was that, the first time he'd completed 90 in the Premier League for 12 months. So I don't think it was ever going to be realistic that he would, with Van Dijk being out, that we'd see Matip as this absolute rock that would play game after game after game. Hopefully, touch wood, he can build up his fitness levels, stay fit in the next few weeks, and put some games back to back. But I just think, and also I think the way that Reece Williams has performed so far, I think he merits another opportunity. I don't necessarily see it as some huge kind of gamble, because I think everything that's been thrown in his path so far, he's risen to the challenge with, and there's almost probably not the same kind of hype around him as, of course, there was around Trent Alexander-Arnold when he was coming in. But of course, with Trent, he was still reliant on Nathaniel Clyne getting injured and getting thrown in at the deep end, and sometimes that can be the absolute making of a young player when a chance almost comes out of nowhere. Because Reece Williams wouldn't have been expected to be playing Champions League football if you'd asked him that a month ago. But this amazing opportunity has arisen, and he's certainly looked the part when he's played for Liverpool so far this season.
Well, what's your take as well, James, on the sort of the general vibe around the place? Because they are strange times, of course, for all of us. We had a bit of a pre-match chat there before we started this about how strange it is for us personally. But in terms of the club as well, it's felt to me as a fan really intense. Not just in terms of the fixture, but in terms of fixtures, but in terms of everything that's gone on. Even this weekend with all the stuff around Salah. Then before that, the controversy of Everton, the injury to Van Dijk. It's constantly felt like Liverpool have been the story, but Liverpool have been the negative story of almost every time they've played. And obviously then you throw in things like the 7-2 and things like that. Obviously various players getting coronavirus at different points and what have you. What do you feel the vibe is around the club? See, because the fair play to them, they've coped pretty well with all of that, haven't they?
Yeah, I think you're right. It has been, when you think back over what's happened since the start of October, it's absolutely crazy, isn't it? When you think the amount of stuff that's been packed into such a short period, with the heaviest defeat for more than half a century, losing Van Dijk, losing Thiago, losing Matip, losing Keita, still no sign of Oxlade-Chamberlain, all these things that have been obstacles that have been thrown in Liverpool's path, the VAR decisions that have gone against them. And I think it has been absolutely energy sapping. I think when you speak to people around the club, they say that it's been such an intense period, because it would be hard enough dealing with all those injuries and dealing with this schedule at the best of times. But when you've got COVID thrown in as well, the fact that you're playing in front of empty stadiums all the time, I think publicly players, the managers and coaches, you're not going to really catch them talking about that much as a negative, because they, you don't want to be focusing on negatives. You don't want to be putting excuses in anyone's heads. But from being at the home games, especially, like, I can't even begin to say like how soulless the occasions are. And I've been amazed that Liverpool have consistently delivered in the absence of fans, especially when we know that, that how special that link is between the fans and this team that Klopp has created. So yeah, I think everyone's probably looking forward to trying to, 2 more massive efforts this week, and then, just puff out the cheeks and take a breather during the international break, because it has been, an absolutely ridiculous period. And thankfully, so far, Liverpool have come through it, with certainly the last few weeks unscathed results-wise.
I think on it being relentless, on the schedule, and on how tiring it is mentally and physically, one player I think that a lot of people now are identifying as being a bit of an issue, maybe just being a bit tired physically and mentally, which of course is allowed. It is Firmino at the moment. People are worried about his form, James, and wondering whether with Jota hitting the ground running, could there potentially be a shuffling of the pack up front tonight, where we see Bobby on the bench, maybe?
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I think I think Shaqiri potentially as well you'd have to come into the conversation with the way that he impacted the game. But yeah, Jota, I mean, I'd be lying if I said I expected him to come in and light the place up, like he has done. It was, he just looks every inch a Liverpool player, doesn't he? And a Klopp player in terms of the skill set and the desire and the will to win. And he's such an intelligent footballer as well. As good as the pass was from Shaqiri, the run that he made for the winning goal at the weekend was absolutely unbelievable. And so I think, I would expect Jota to play tonight. And then I think Klopp, if Jota does well again, then he's got a huge decision to make going into that game at the Etihad, because I can't really think of a really big game under Klopp where Firmino hasn't, been picked if he's been available. But I think it has to be a serious conversation. I still think that Klopp thinks Firmino is so key to the way that Liverpool play that he probably will go with him. But personally, I'd be starting Jota instead of Firmino at the Etihad, just because, I think if I look at it from a Man City defender's point of view, who would you rather face at the moment? Well, I think they'd rather face what looks like a bit of a jaded Firmino, who's not firing all cylinders, and his touch is letting him down at times. He's not linking play as well as we've seen previously. Or would you rather face Jota, who looks, just an absolute revelation with the way that he just makes things happen time after time? So yeah, I think I'm sure in his head, if Jota is starting tonight, he will think, right, this is a massive, massive chance for me to prove that you just cannot leave me out at the Etihad. Because I think, although Klopp obviously has found room for Jota and the front three previously, I don't think that's realistic at the Etihad. I'm sure he'll go with 3 in midfield at the Etihad, so that there are only 3 places in that front line up for grabs.
Just on, you mentioned Shaqiri there. I just wanted to get you on him really last of all, James. He is a bit of a sort of cult figure, cult hero, well liked among Liverpool fans. But it did look like he was going, didn't it? Klopp left him out of the lineup and sort of was quite upfront in saying there was something brewing transfer-wise. That didn't go through, and then he was talking about it yesterday, wasn't he, in his press conference?
Yeah, and I think Klopp, the way that Klopp always is with things like that, I think his attitude was I would love Shaqiri to stay, but if his heart's not in it, if he does genuinely want a fresh start and a new challenge elsewhere, then so be it. If the club's demands are met, Klopp's never been one for wanting to keep people around that aren't 100% committed to the cause. So yeah, I'm so pleased that he ended up staying put, because I remember speaking to a few people around the night when we played Arsenal in the League Cup, and of course he was left out relatively short notice that day, and it soon became pretty clear that transfer talks were going on in the background. And he could have gone back to the Bundesliga. He could have gone somewhere where he's probably guaranteed a starting spot. But thankfully, when Shaqiri weighed it all up, I think he thought, well, hang on a minute, anywhere from Liverpool at the moment is a step down. And the one thing with Shaqiri that he's not short of is self-confidence. And I think he just backed himself to, do you know what? I believe I can force my way back into the manager's plans here. And because that's the frustrating thing with him. I don't think anyone ever questions, do they, his quality, because I was looking yesterday. I think he's only started 20 games as a Liverpool player, but I think he's got something like eight goals and 6 assists. And very rarely do you ever see Shaqiri in a Liverpool shirt not affecting a game in a positive way. And I think also, especially at the moment, when there's no Keita, when there's no Oxlade-Chamberlain, when there's no Thiago, that the West Ham game was hard viewing for a long time because Liverpool's midfield just lacked that kind of spark and creative ability. And then he comes on and produces a bit of absolute magic. So really pleased that Shaqiri stayed put. And if he can stay fit, he will have a big role to play in Liverpool's mission in terms of trophies this season.
And how do you think he's seen around the place, James? Because you mentioned there his confidence, and I remember us being out in America when the friendly against Manchester United, he comes on and scores an overhead kick, and he was being interviewed afterwards, and he was just sort of like, "Well, that's what I do, mate. Do you know what I mean? That's how good I am." And that that's brilliant, I think, from a fan point of view. But then I think if you're analysing it, you worry. If he's a bit too cocky around the place, he's maybe not that well liked. But do you get the sense that he is liked around the place?
Yeah, no, I've never heard anyone say a bad word about him. I know there was various kind of whispers, probably more social media than anywhere else last season, because he was absent for so long, and people were saying that there'd been like a falling out. And the reality was he had a horrible time last season with this calf injury where he kept on being on the brink of a comeback or making a comeback and then breaking down again, and they had to send him over to Switzerland to see a specialist. And no, do you know what? Everyone, I all the dealings I've had with him, he's been absolutely brilliant. I absolutely love doing interviews with him, and I get the impression the players absolutely love him, and Klopp and the staff as well. You need that degree of cockiness and self-confidence, and I think it only becomes a problem if it tips over into arrogance and you're not applying yourself in the right way. But I've never ever heard anyone question Shaqiri's commitment or his work ethic around the place. And I think the reality is, if there were any issues on that front, he wouldn't still be a Liverpool player. The fact that Klopp wanted him to stay, if he wanted to stay this summer, says a lot about the way that Klopp regards him, not only as a player but as a person as well. And there was, I think when he was at Stoke, wasn't there was all those whispers about he didn't really put it in, and he was a passenger, and which and you cut. So then you wondered when he came to Liverpool, well, how's that going to work out with a manager like Klopp? But no, since he's been a Liverpool player, I've never heard anyone say a bad word about Shaqiri.
Brilliant stuff, James. If you haven't checked out James's stuff already on The Athletic, do go and do so. It is brilliant stuff from James and the team that cover Liverpool there. And then there's loads of stuff on there as well. Non-Liverpool, you can get lost for hours in The Athletic. It's very easy. James, thanks very much for taking the time this morning to speak to us on the Anfield Wrap. That has been Talking Reds.